By way of introduction and just a welcome and a thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this recap of the GEC, the Global Entrepreneurship Congress 2023 in Melbourne. My name is Dr. Chad Redondo. I'm the Managing Director for the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all on. I'm over here in Yuggera country, up just in Queensland, outside of Brizzy. And I want to pay respect and acknowledge elders, both past, present, and emerging. Thank you very much, everybody, for hopping on, and thank you for the board. As I mentioned before, we are heading into the end of the year. Schedules are jammed. We're getting stuff done before we shift off. A few people are already off and away. But we also did acknowledge that we want to record this so that we had a lot of people sign up that aren't able to make it today, or they do want the recording. So we'll be putting that out there and just sharing a little bit around what happened and next step. So I might just go around the room briefly and introduce both the operational team and the board that's here. And I might just start with over to the chair, Jules, just to say a bit of hi and how do you do?
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for the acknowledgement. I'm also on Yuggera and Turrbal country this morning in Brisbane. I live out on Biggambull country at Gundawindi in southwest Queensland. I am very happily the chair of Gen Australia and certainly, keen to hear and get feedback from everybody around both the Congress itself and also, what's next and what we focus on. I guess my interest, and I know quite a few of the names who have joined us, my interest is really also around regional innovation. How do we, in smaller communities with fewer people, look at how we can still ensure that we are connecting, that we are looking at what innovation looks like in terms of how we have really prosperous communities. So really keen for the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. Andy, over to you.
Sure. Great. Thanks for having me. Andy Stoll here. I'm actually calling in from Kansas City in the U.S. I work at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. Some of you may be familiar. The foundation is a big supporter of the Global Entrepreneurship Network and Brown. And personally, I'm a big supporter of Chad and have had the opportunity to work alongside him on a number of projects and recently embedded in the Gen Australia board. Also, just a participant at the GEC in Melbourne. Have participated in some past GEC, so super excited to engage even more with some folks on the call that I haven't met yet. I am just one note, going to have to probably duck off a little early from the call, a little unanticipated scheduling thing here for evening over here. But excited to hear what folks have to say about the GEC Melbourne experience.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. It's amazing to have you on the call. Again, all the way over from Kansas City. As Philippe said, the amazing work you're doing at the Kauffman Foundation. So thank you. Grant, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. It's really interesting to be here at the point where we're able to reflect on the last sort of 18 months or so and the Congress as well, and just feeling like it's going to be a really valuable session. So it's great to see representatives here from the board of Gen Australia. Thanks, Annie, for dialing in from Kansas. That's pretty cool, above and beyond. And looking forward to the conversation. And as Chad said a moment ago, we're just going to go through a little bit of oversight and intro, and then I'll start promoting people up to the panel when people have got something to say. Maybe just pop your hand up, which I think you can do, raise your hand, and I'll pop you up onto the panel so you can have a few words.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Grant. So for the next little bit, we are going to go through a bit of a slide deck just to do a bit of recap, and the intent around this is to share not just what happened at the GEC, but a bit of the back office in terms of how we did the evaluation. I'm conscious that the people on this call are both participants in, but as well as deliverers of the innovation ecosystem. So our reason for being is to build capacity, capability, connection, collaboration within the innovation ecosystem in Australia. So this is us doing that through this presentation as much as sharing how the GEC went. So, and Jasmine, thank you very, very much. I see that hand. So we'll go through the presentation, then we'll start promoting people onto the big screen so that we can all have a bit of a yarn around the around the fire as we reflect and chat and talk about what's next. So I will share screen now. Go there, go there, and there. Don't know if I'm sharing the right one. Possibly not. I just escape. Stop. Share.
You did have the right one for a moment there, but then you turned it off.
Did I? Here we go. All right. See that okay?
Yep, you're on. Yep,
Excellent. Groovy. So the GEC, what was it? What happened? And where to from here? So as far as an event goes, for those who attended, you're familiar with the format. It was over 4 days. You know, the GEC has been around since 2009, and it really brings people together to say, how do we build one global entrepreneur ecosystem? People from all around the world, obviously highly representative of the host country as well. And within the GEC, you have other parallel events. So day one is typically your openers and your main plenaries. Days 2 and 3 is your multiple panel sessions, and day 4 is more of an intensive workshop. But through that, we have things like the Startup Nation Summit and the Research Summit and the Global Business Angel Network Summit and the Founders Summit. And we have all these specialist 2 to 4 hour blocks, as well as a ministerial for government policy. And so really trying to build capacity in all the facets of the innovation ecosystem. As we get into this, I do want to give a huge credit to those that have come before. And I remember, like, I attended a lot of innovation events across Australia. I observed from afar in amazement at what they do. And up until the GEC, I always said, wow, I have a lot of respect for what you do, and that's probably not something I want to do. And after doing the GEC, I have even more respect for what they do. Like, it is just, you know, the monumental task that they do on a regular basis, year after year. This was a GEC, a one-off. It was 2 years in the planning. But these guys just keep at it, from the folks at West Tech Fest and at Spark Festival and George down at Pause Fest, and the folks that are now doing Something Fest and the previous iterations of Myriad and Code up in Queensland, the Thrive Festival down in Victoria. Obviously, what Danielle and Craig are doing with South Start down in South Australia. Peter's work with the Canberra Innovation Network and the Innovation Showcase they do there. Olive and Tea with their festivals they run in October for October Business Month, and of course, what they're doing up in the Tropical Innovation Festival, and also some smaller festivals across Australia that are emerging. So we have a really good base of activity. Pretty much every other month we have some activities going on. So really just a credit to those people that are leading the way in this. And I've learned a lot from them. And the GEC wouldn't be what it was without the inspiration and the insights from a lot of what came before. The GEC, we can consider it as a series of stages. There was the stage of the bid process, you know, and I got reached out to in March of 20 saying, hey, look, we're thinking about bringing the GEC to Australia. What do you reckon we give it a shot? We said, sure. And it was about a year and a half or so that we went around and looked for underwriters and how are we practically going to do it. And then we secured it. We got the word that it was a go in September of 2021. And then through that, we started finalizing contracts, but then we also started building up the delegation going to Riyadh in 2022. And this is a really important story part relating to the GEC, because Gen Australia, 2 of the board members, Matt and Jules, were on that trip, part of that delegation. So these delegations that you have where you build that community and you get people engaged and shared experiences is really important. And a lot of those people that went over there with us were instrumental in delivering the GEC a year and a half later. So that really played a key part. And then there's the pre-engagement phase, and that's around April to November, which I'll go into a bit more detail. And that's really where we said, okay, we're going to have this event. How do we make the most of it? How do we do a deep engagement across the ecosystem? So we really had that deep engagement with over 500 people and across 30 working streams, which I'll share about. And then November to February, well, I'll just classify that as the date change. And there were certain commercial pressures with the GEC. And the reason I share that is just because anyone who runs events like this or does anything in the ecosystem know that there's lots of ups and downs, and that was a big transition in the process. And then from February to September, it was kind of all hands on deck, where they were really delivering the delegates and the programming and the packages. And so that purple bit is where I want to focus on now as we move forward. Just real quickly on those early days, I do also want to acknowledge the many people, and a few of them are on the call now. Just a shout out to Philippe as well from Mandalay and Innovation Architects, and a lot of the other ones that were supporters of this. Like even before anything was on, we put the call out there saying, hey, look, we want to do a thing. We can't do it on our own. We want to do it aligned with everybody else. And really got that support from across the Australian ecosystem and from multiple governments as well, which we really appreciate. Because even though it was an event down in Victoria and Melbourne, we want it to be a nationwide representation. So that pre-engagement stage, those of you who heard me talk about this before, know the approach that we took, where we looked at the innovation ecosystem for what we call 4 domains. We looked at it by industry, we looked at it by area of impact, we looked at it by technology, and we looked at it by function. Because one of the things we realize is that people it's not just innovation in general or entrepreneurship in general. People are getting into their tribes. They want to affect youth entrepreneurship. They're passionate about regional or they're really into the mining and the decarbonization, regional transition, or the creative industries. And so we wanted to give a voice at the GEC to all these different groups and really respect the leadership that we're seeing in there. And so we held a series of workshops. We engaged over 500 leaders across 30 different working streams to say, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges in your particular ecosystem? And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the leads. We did a call out as soon as we got back from Riyadh, when we can actually start talking about it. We went out to the ecosystem and said, hey, look, do you want to be a lead in this area? And these people raised their hand on volunteer basis, and they're the ones that brought those sub-ecosystems together. I mean, again, we wouldn't have been able to do it without them, and they really were able to provide rich insights into the GEC. And I'm just going to go through these. I'm not going to read them all through, and I'm happy to send the slide deck out after. But these are the themes that started coming out as we had the convenings. We brought people together. We also started mapping policies related to each area. And these are the things that people said, if we could do anything, these would be our priorities. And you can see that there's certain commonalities, culture and people, mapping, clarity, promotion, advocacy, developing our workforce, increasing engagement. So you have in there for space and defense, for regional, for university and research, for the SDGs, for schools and education, for tourism, for climate, for women, for incubation, food and agriculture, creative industries, health and life sciences, and investment risk capital, resources, mining, and energy. And it was such rich conversations, and we went through one and sometimes 2 separate sessions where we said, okay, well, what needs to happen? What's the content of the GEC, and how do we build that opportunity? But one of the things that we looked at by going through all those sub areas, it provided us with the opportunity to take a step back and say, what's common about all of them? And one of the things we realized with that kind of higher horizon view is that everything we do in the innovation ecosystem tends to, what we feel, fall into 5 areas. And we're constantly testing this. We'd love your feedback, even on this call, on what you think as far as do these align? Because we think that, one of the things that we do in the ecosystem is clarity, and that's a lot around that ecosystem mapping and that research and what are we actually working with? Because quite often it can be a bit of this fuzzy, complex thing, a lot of anecdotal stories, but how do we get that clarity on what needs to happen and where we are? 2, there's a lot around connection and connectivity, and that's connection geographically within a local ecosystem, and within that ecosystem and nationally and globally, connecting people from an idea all the way to scale, connecting people from research and translation. And these are your major events and the facilitations or the trade missions, anything that's that boundary spanning work to bring people together. 3rd, we see people building capability and capacity. So that's capability in individual leaders, that's capability in our institutions like our government and our university and our research sectors. And it's also capacity, making sure that we have the right funding and that we're sustainable. 4, it's collaboration for purpose. it's not just collaborating for the sake of it, but what are we practically solving, coming together to do open challenges and say, these are the things that's bringing us together to solve it. Hence, a lot of those industry sector streams. And finally, advocacy and promotion. Who's the voice for innovation and entrepreneurship in your region? So again, this is open for testing, but we're using this now moving forward to benchmark and say, where is a given region, where is a given sector, where is a given technology base at in all of these areas? Do we have a map? Are people connected and coming together around events? What's the capability like? Is there a professional development cycle for individuals? Do you know the challenges in your region or in your sector we're trying to solve, and are people coming together to do it, and is it funded to do it? And who is the voice for what you're doing in your region? And it really creates a cadence and a common framework by which we can all come together and share in this thing, which historically is a bit of a loose, complex, fuzzy conversation. So with the GEC, we're going to shift over into what was it and what happened. So that was the conversation before the GEC. Now we're heading into the GEC. And so we developed what we call the theory of change. Now, if you haven't heard of a theory of change, really, it's just the theory by which we think we're going to get some outcomes based on what we do. And so you can see here, it's just a high level. We think that entrepreneurial activity is essential for regional growth, firm sustainability, and individual progress. We think that entrepreneurship drives economic, social, individual, and institutional resilience. We think entrepreneurship is enabled by global and regional ecosystems made up of diverse roles, including government, uni, research, talent, skills development providers, service providers, entrepreneurs, investors, corporations, and more. We also think that effective ecosystems require strength in each of these roles, as well as connectivity across roles and regional ecosystems. So therefore, global events such as the GEC provide that clarity and understanding about entrepreneurship impact, create connections and connectivity between roles, build capacity and capability in entrepreneur ecosystem roles and individual leaders in those roles, bring leaders and institutions together to collaborate for purpose for shared impact, and provide advocacy and promotion for both local and general entrepreneur activity. So it's a logical way to say this is justifying why we think we need to have a GEC, and you could do the same thing for the work that you do. And so therefore, we define what we expect to have an outcome. Again, this is around those 5 areas. And we also expect what that longer term impact is for economic, social, individual, and institutional outcomes. This can be helpful when you're talking about funding or you're talking about justifying your position to say, going back to the stakeholders that might actually pay to have some of these things done. And so this is the basis for which we tested and did our surveys. So we did a pre-survey, we did a post-survey, and we developed indicators and questions around, did we achieve clarity? Did the delegates get connection? Or did they build capability capacity? Are we collaborating for purpose? And, did it support them in doing their advocacy and promotion? So who went to the GEC and what was it like? We had around 2,500 registrations, so 2,464 people registered for the event across 125 countries. 52% of those from Australia, so about half was from Australia, another 12% from the US, 6% from New Zealand, our neighbors nearby, and then the average delegate size across everyone, including Australia, was around 8. Now, the gender split for the registered delegates was around 60-40, 60% male, 40% female, but you can see there I also broke it down based on some of the countries. So you can see that some of the other countries, like the delegate split on gender, really vary depending on the country. It was more a 50-50 split for Australia, US, and New Zealand. For some of the others, there's a little bit more leaning towards the male, which got up to that 60% male, 40% female. Obviously, going for parity whenever we can to encourage that in our delegate building. Around 40% of the people identified as entrepreneurs. Now, a big caveat there is that most of the people on this call, even if you work in research or government or whatever, would identify as an entrepreneur because you likely have an ABN or you're self-starting. And so there was a lot of crossover. So we do need to get more refined on how we ask that question, but you can see there, a lot of people identified as entrepreneurs, and then government policymakers, investors, some academics, researchers, trainers, ecosystem builders, media, NGOs. So really a cross-section of that ecosystem. In terms of presenters, there were 94 sessions at the GEC, 262 speakers from 49 countries, and 353 speaking occasions. And so, somebody said something, at a dedicated session 353 times, including panel sessions. And when you average everything out, there's about 3.8 average speakers per session. And so we really try to, when people come to the country or come to a GEC, we try and leverage their role as much as possible, getting them multiple speaking points where we can to maximize that connection with the audience. Now, I'm gonna highlight something here in that the male representation was stronger, 63% male, 38% female, or 37% should be if my math's right, for speaking. There was 11 sessions with all male panels, and the reason I highlight this is because people did notice it. The reason why this happens is because people are, a lot of the sessions are controlled by those who manage those sessions, and so even though we set it up and aim for parity, people pull out, or there could be some changes or things that weren't controlled, and so there were some all male panel sessions, which obviously we try not to have. But I'd also say one of the lessons and one of the things that we're going to be working on moving forward for events that we run in Australia is just making sure that you have a committee, having that oversight, that governance for the checks and balances, because these kind of things can slip through. Occasionally you see it on social media, somebody calls it out, and you really need that overarching perspective on it, and getting multiple people to look into it as an intentional committee, an intentional structure. So we did hear that loud and clear, and for some of the activities we're doing in Australia moving forward, this is being addressed. We had about 43% of the speakers were from Australia, but they also spoke in about 35% of the speaker positions. So there were more Australian speakers, but we wanted to make sure that we had a diversity within the different presentations so that people got that real global flavor. So how did we go? How did we go in achieving some of those outcomes? So the number one thing that people got out of this was gaining new information and knowledge. That was followed closely by connecting with people, and then sharing knowledge I have to the benefit of others. Collaborating with others, learning practical skills, promoting the business, advocating for support, learning the skills to become more sustainable, accessing new customers, and accessing funds. So accessing customers and funds wasn't as high, both on the expectation as well as on the actual outcome, but you can see there on the right, it also varied significantly based on where you're coming from. So local government got a lot from gaining new knowledge, whereas university got a lot from connecting with people. There's a 14% increase in expectations for the application to the actual regions itself. New Zealand, out of all the countries, had the highest outcomes based on their expectations. And males and females generally had similar expectations, but female delegates realized greater outcomes in collaboration and advocacy than their male counterparts. Just some interesting insights there. And getting close to the end here, as far as an actual impact, or it's hard to assess impact after something like this, but we did say, what are you expecting to do? Predominantly people are expecting to apply the information and knowledge for clarity, followed by connection, and then collaborating with others, having that voice for advocacy, and then applying some skills they learned, because it was a short time to actually gain those skills. And this is just a few pull quotes where we can see then those people expressing themselves, from clarity, being able to gain insights around the policy, connection around the future opportunities, building the capability from the sessions on ecosystem development, collaborating, particularly with some of their state government counterparts, even within Australia, bringing the country together, and advocating for the regional partnership within their country. A few other quick highlights. We did win the Gen Australia 2023 Research Champion Award for the work that we're doing in mapping and measuring, which is a real honor, and it's a nationwide award, even though I was there to receive it. But that really is a testament to some of the work we're doing as a nation in terms of mapping ecosystems, to understanding where we're at for ecosystem assessment. Other outcomes: the Entrepreneurship World Cup 2024, the Startup Network, previously Startup Victoria, is going to be delivering that in 2024. I'm very excited about that, to support them. We've run the Entrepreneurship World Cup, which is a massive opportunity, over $1 million in prizes and opportunities. People believe it's going to be in Bahrain again this year, where people actually fly there to pitch. It's really great that they're going to be supporting that. And also Global Entrepreneurship Week, where Silicon Coast up in the Sunshine Coast is going to be supporting that in 2024. So as a result of the GEC, really getting those others on board to say we get the vision, let it help with actually delivering some of the programs within the GEN framework. And also then formalizing the board. We had a board set up as we headed in the GEC. We were able to get some additional board members coming through, which was absolutely so pleased about as far as that leadership and direction as we move forward. And you can see those there. And obviously with Grant, with the operations support as well, really have a strong basis. And we are all also then continue to look to expand and make sure that we have that representation and diversity within the board to lead us forward. So as one of the final closing statements, so what do? Gen Australia builds capacity, capability, and connectivity for everyone in the Australian innovation ecosystem. And we do that by working with governments, universities, incubators, and peak bodies to align challenges, develop strategies, conduct research, measure impact, and build communities of practice around those 5 areas we mentioned before. And we believe that's best achieved through collective impact and aligned effort. We can't do it alone. So our goal is to help those who then help innovation entrepreneurs, and how we can do it collectively better together. And that includes going for grants and make sure that we have the rigor behind it and the substantive directions to support our work. Which then comes to that framework I mentioned before. We'll close there. Some of the things we are working on, and we are working on some benchmarking across Australia around these 5 areas. There will be an annual event coming up, and I don't have enough details to share now, but effectively what we are aiming to do with the GEC at a very hyper-local level, but doing it at a different location every year across 10 years. I'm just absolutely excited about that as an opportunity. Look forward to sharing more come around Jan or Feb. Continuing to do the policy mapping work, to make sure that we inform government and they're aligned, developing some communities of practice, and also creating some shared mentoring networks, particularly to support regional communities that may not have access to it. So I'm going to stop there. I'm very keen to hear people's insights for the next half hour or so of the session, and start bringing people into the panel session. Grant, as you bring people in, would love to maybe just hear reflections on the board. Most of that you've seen, some you haven't. But just keen to hear your thoughts on top of mind.
Chad,
Jules?
I think, as always, that summary is fantastic. I think I am particularly keen to see, now that the big sugar hit of the Global Congress has been and gone, what do we actually want at a national level? And this piece around what's everybody doing that we can add value to. So where do we help and support? Where do we need to get out of the road? How do we all kind of work together? I think there's enough work and activity for all of us. It's how we want to help each other out, given we're a really big country and all of us are trying to do really great work. How do we do it together is really the conversation I'm keen to hear from others on the call.
Yeah, great, Jules. Echo that, absolutely. Andy?
Yeah, I'll just chime in a little bit. Well, first of all, congratulations to everyone for hosting what I thought was a really magnificent GEC event. I know a lot of people who were not from Australia came in thinking about kangaroos, and they left thinking about entrepreneurship, and really being impressed with the amount and the level of engagement across the country, and not just in the cities, but in the regional areas around entrepreneurship. One reason that I think, well, maybe I can provide an outside perspective as a person that's not from Australia and not sort of doesn't have a horse in the race, if you will. There are few countries that I'm aware of that have been able to take an entire country approach to building an entrepreneurial ecosystem. The reason that's important is that entrepreneurs don't care where the resources that they need to answer their question, find their resource, hire their person, get their money, find the answer to their questions. They will go anywhere as long as they're going to get the answer for what they need at the moment that they need it. And even in places like the United States, because of the way sort of government and politics works, that always gets pressed pretty low down into the into sort of in the U.S. context to sort of the state level. I think in the UK context, individual countries, even in the European Union, because of the way it's sort of governed, it gets pressed down to the country level. But there are a few places. I can think of Scotland. I can think of Malaysia, where a entire countrywide network has been able to form to really bring together cross-sector collaboration that connects together activities both at the institutional level and the grassroots level. And then I've already said kind of things about CHAD, but I would just re-emphasize, because I spend a lot of time talking to people all over the place. Very few countries have a CHAD, if you will, which is somebody that's fully interested in building the connective tissue and building constellations, not new stars. And I think one of the opportunities with Gen Australia is to build on the energy and the momentum. And I think the freshness that GEC put on the Australian Entrepreneurship Foundation brand, for how to get all the pieces to work together. How do we find the resources necessary, money and otherwise, to support not just the individual programs in the country, but the connective tissue. And that connective tissue is always taken for granted in a lot of places, but the strength in the ecosystem is not in the number of its parts, but it's in the connective tissue. And so many countries, regions, states, territories get so hung up on counting the parts. Oh, we have 3 incubators and 4 accelerators and 3 venture capital funds and 9 universities and 3 entrepreneurship support offices. I usually say to people, I don't actually care unless you can explain to me how those things work together. And I think there's such a moment and an opportunity coming out of GEC Melbourne to really capitalize on the energy of how all the people, not just on this call, but the extended network that I think has been built, that catalyzed or subversively catalyzed by the GEC experience under a shared brand, Gen Australia or whatever you want to call it. But there's room for everybody to play within that network. And to come back to what I just said earlier, it's really under this notion, the goal of building an entrepreneurship ecosystem is building constellations, not stars. I played that quote the other day from a writer who's writing about how networks forms. And I just think it's a good way to think about what Spencer and Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but really is the point of Gen Australia, which is how do we connect together all the existing things to get more constellation and more collaboration around the things that will help Australia be a more supportive environment for entrepreneurs and innovators, regardless of who they are, where they come from. So cheering everybody on, happy to be supportive, but I think this is the moment to capitalize on the activities that came out of GEC to really figure out ways to create more collaboration amongst the already many engaged players across the country, and then really capitalize on the fact that the whole world came to your doorstep. There's a lot of great relationships that came out of that to then link the Australian network to this global network.
That's great, Andy. Thank you so much. And that kind of echoes what Jules was saying, is how do we connect that together? How do we move it forward? I do like your comment on the came thinking kangaroos and left thinking entrepreneurs, to really kind of position Australia well in that connectivity tissue. So maybe if we can kind of focus on that over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm definitely keen to hear from others who have popped on. If you went to the GEC, your reflections on the presentation, and also that notion on for 2024 as we move forward, using that framework as kind of a loose idea. What would that look like as far as building that connectivity tissue? I reflect on something as we head into it. It's always tempting to, you see a need, a gap, and get involved in actually delivering that thing. And for example, heading into the GEC, we started developing an incubator community of practice. But then I just saw down in Sydney, they had an innovation precinct symposium. And out of that came a innovation precinct collective. Great. We don't have to do that now. What we have to do now is to support them and make sure everybody knows about it and drive it towards them. So we act where there might be a gap. As soon as the market responds, great, step back and fuel that and feed that. We do that with everybody we can. So that's kind of a philosophy, a principle on how we aim to work with that in mind. then how do we build that connectivity across Australia? As Andy said, it's fairly not necessarily as much known. So I might hop over to Jasmine, and as you open up, if you can just share who you are, where you're from, and just reflections on the presentation of the GEC experience and thoughts.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm Jasmine Batra. I'm based in the beautiful Sunshine Coast currently. I've been running a growth marketing agency, Arrow Digital, since 2007, helping. So the year the iPhones were launched, helping companies to just grow and scale internationally, mostly US and UK, that was the market. Last 3 years, I've been working on a incubator, the Big Leap program, which is an Oz industry-backed accelerator for Australian technology companies to help them grow and scale with a specific focus of India as a market. So a lot of things in the session. So GEC, I'm just so glad that I knew about it, I learned about it, and I got there. And I know so many people who I feel, oh, if only they knew, I feel what they have missed out on. So that's really my first thing, is a space where, you can be aware of all the things which are entrepreneurship, innovation, tech happening nationally, regionally, internationally. My mandate at the moment is more cross-country collaboration. That's what I'm seeking. And so a few things, Julia, that you shared. One was interest in regional innovation. Definitely, I would love to work and support there. And second, I can see that there is this, that the help is available, value and support for what is available, but how do you find those who are looking for help and support? And that's a challenge. So if I'm looking to work with companies, who do I go to? That pathway of connectivity, collaboration, and cross-country. And that's something I'm really keen to see how we could develop as a resource, because it's once you take a path and you miss out on it. But the other thing I would like to bring, of course, all these other countries are growing. There was a recent Harvard cross-country complexity report, which didn't put in Australia in a very, good position. So how do we show ourselves as something that is not a complex country, but because innovation and research is still something we are very good at. So yeah, all of those things, I don't have the answers, but a lot of questions and a lot of ways, looking to see how or who I could connect to, support to help entrepreneurs in that way, and how I can collaborate in the system and contribute.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Jasmine. And yeah, it really speaks to that connectivity. It's, as Andy said, it's not necessarily knowing that the actors are there, but how do we connect to them as well? That's good. Thank you. Dave, over to you.
Good day, everyone. From Dave Clare from Perth, West Australia, although I am a secret agent Queenslander, right? Because I did actually sneak into the Queensland photo, if you remember at the time when we were there, because we will be moving over to the sunny coast area. I think we're planning around April, so we will be over there, where all the cool kids are, apparently. Circle Leadership, my organization, we actually are here to evolve the world of work, and we work on creating an ecosystem organizations rather than ecosystem organizations. So for me, it was my very first GEC that I'd ever been to. So Jeff Hoffman invited me. Jeff and I had keynoted together in the States. He said, "You got to come along." I'm like, "What is?" So I went to it, of course. So firstly, thank you for welcoming me into the GEC and to GEN. It was amazing to be a part of it. What I found that was interesting for me, because I spent a lot more time probably in the village. I went into some of the plenary sessions, but I wanted to just talking to people. And I, two words that came up all the time, which you've already brought up in here, which I thought were fascinating: collaboration and ecosystems. And for me, they're two really important words. And I guess for me, what I found interesting is I started asking people, what does collaboration mean to you? So I want to understand, when we talk about collaboration, what does it actually mean? Is it just the new wanky word for teamwork, or does it mean something more? And then what is an ecosystem? Everyone talk about these ecosystems, because it's something that I've been doing since 2001, as our whole leadership model is an ecosystem. So, and how we build organizations. And so it was fascinating for me. And I just something, I have my answers for that, but it was interesting. I got different answers from a lot of people as to what collaboration really is. And I think the one thing I wanted to share with everybody is that collaboration cannot survive in an ecosystem. It can only work in an ecosystem. And for us, what we call collaboration is when logos and egos are off the table and no one gives a crap who gets the credit and we're all here for the greater good. That's collaboration. That's our definition of collaboration. And just think about that. And I think it was the gentleman from Kansas that was saying, like, how do we get this connectivity? And then, like, how do we define what the ecosystem is in Australia for entrepreneurs? Like, do we have a definition of what that actually is and what it looks like? So we go, well, we're talking about ecosystem, it means this, because for me, words matter and the order of words matter. So if we can get, I'm not saying you don't have it. I just don't know what it is yet because I'm a newbie. And if there is already answers to these questions, that's awesome. I'd just like to know the answers. And if there's not clear answers, then I think there's something that would be pretty powerful for us as a country to be able to get, when we talk about collaboration in Australia, it means this. When we talk about ecosystems, it means this. That'd be my take. But thank you so much for welcoming me into the GEC at the time. And it was great to meet some familiar faces on the screen here. And it was just really an absolute privilege. I came back buzzing. I actually was writing a book and I've shelved that book, pardon the pun, but I've actually started writing a new one. And I'm actually mentoring two young fellas who are in the youth. So I'm now mentoring those two young fellas who are doing AI and automation. So Seb and Lachlan there. So I just wanted to pitch in and contribute. So.
That's awesome, Dave. And yeah, and great to hear the stories on kind of the impact and that ongoing connection. And you're absolutely right. Just couldn't agree more on the value of language, because we do have a bit of our own special language in this whole innovation ecosystem, collaboration, connectivity, all these. Like, what does it actually mean? I think everybody being on the same song sheet is absolutely critical. And I've really encouraged to have your input into that as well moving forward. Thanks, Dave. Aaron, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's Aaron from Government of South Australia. I work for the state's chief entrepreneur and primarily in innovation ecosystem support work. I just want to acknowledge, just first off, the amazing experience that the Congress was. That was my first GEC, and I have tried to explain what it was like to people that weren't there, and all I can come up with was a fire hose of the kind of connections, collaboration, knowledge. It was amazing. And if I sort of think back sort of against that framework that you sort of showed us earlier, the C's, for me, it was super strong on connection, capability, and collaboration, which to my mind leads to better clarity, which leads to better advocacy, which kind of loops back in on itself again. So I see the framework almost as sort of circular in a sense. The thing that really stood out for me is that sometimes I think when you're, deep in trying to work in the complexity of ecosystems, it can feel lonely, under-resourced, and you're often spread very thin as an ecosystem builder or an entrepreneurship support organization. And I think the Congress for me helped me feel that I wasn't alone. In fact, there are people all over the world that are building good practice and facing similar challenges in different contexts. And so it really felt like a way to bring some of that together. And there are patterns and ways of working in other places where, there are aspects of that were very applicable to what we're trying to do, for example, in South Australia. But it just wouldn't have been self-evident without bringing, all of those diverse knowledge sets and people and perspectives together through the Congress. And for me, it sort of, I guess, helped put some of the stuff that's sort of right in front of me into a much bigger bucket, along with access to opportunity to solve for some of that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Aaron. Look, and you're absolutely right. Like I know that I echo kind of the sense at times it can be lonely. But I'll also say, like, even looking around the faces on the screen, and Aaron, you and I have known each other from way back, and just knowing that you're there, knowing that the other people are there, that we can reach out, we can have a bit of a yarn, but also that global connection. Like Jules, Julia has a quite often comments on her counterpart she feels very close to over in, Africa, and some of the regional leaders over there, as much, if not even more than maybe some of the city center ones here in Australia. But yeah, just echo that. Thanks, Aaron. Philippe, do you want to have a bit of a yarn? Say hello.
Hello. Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Chad, Grant, Julia, anyone on the call, really. I mean, GEC was a beautiful opportunity for my team and I to take a little bit of time out from the day-to-day busyness of our work and just sort of, rethink about the things that are important to us. It was amazing to be able to do that over 4 or 5 days in Melbourne. And so thank you for that. Thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this. And, we've had tons of conversations with multiple people on this call about the things that are important to us and to our work. And I think sort of noting what Dave was saying, we run a funds management company and an innovation advisory company where ecosystems is incredibly important and is sort of the foundational part of everything we do. And so I guess with that, maybe a few points of reflection, perhaps, but also some of the things that are on my mind for 2024 and beyond. And that's been sort of this community of practice. I think I'm very well embedded within a community of ecosystem builders and enablers and leaders and champions, and there's a whole bunch of names for them. And I sort of see day in, day out the challenges and the opportunities and the reasons for us to come together and tackle certain issues, challenges, and look at opportunities collectively. And I love the idea of Gen being a nationwide and with a nationwide sort of network with a global connection to be able to do that. I think very often we tend to I think as I think Aaron was saying or Dave was saying as well, we sort of go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into our own reality in our day-to-day, and it's all granular and it's on the ground and whatever it is, and something that connects us nationally and internationally to constantly have that sounding board and sort of elevate our thinking, I think is really valuable, really important. And what I'd love to see coming through this is this real sense of ecosystem leadership, which I believe is really important for that to be representative of the different actors and stakeholders within the ecosystem as well. I think we all acknowledge that we're in a maybe sort of public sector heavy ecosystem in Australia, and I'd love to see more empowerment and ownership coming from the private side and everything that sits behind that. And I think that's a longer conversation, but it's also acknowledging this concept of ecosystems, and I feel that in my work incredibly much, if it's location, if we're talking about the region, or if we're talking about a tech specific space, or sector specific or impact specific, and how all those sort of interconnect, and where there is enough depth in one space to be able to go really deep and far, but where sort of the cross-pollination between those ecosystems and sort of this umbrella kind of sense still happens as well. I guess on that note, one of the sort of spectrums that I tend to operate or think about a lot is the entrepreneurial ecosystem versus the innovation ecosystem, and kind of like that it's not sort of a black and white kind of distinction between the two, and they kind of really deeply interconnected and enmeshed. And so how are we by being very clear about what we're doing, how are we still talking that same language, how we're being inclusive, but how we're also being specific enough so that we can advocate for certain parts of those ecosystems. I think I've mentioned the thinking big piece. I think owning certain areas collectively within Australia, and doesn't matter where they are then based, is saying like, well, as an Australian ecosystem, we have capabilities sitting in these places, as opposed to being stuck in discussions where Queensland doesn't have this, or New South Wales doesn't have that, or we excel in this. And I kind of feel like, well, as long as we've got that sorted as a country, we're still in a pretty good place. So I'd love those discussions to move to that level. And I did catch your policy, your policy piece as well, and policy analysis. And I guess one of the things that that I'd be really happy to be involved with is great. Love to be able to straddle those different worlds. But I'm kind of my brain always goes to, cool, what does this policy then mean for the opportunities we have on the ground, sort of grassroots, connecting to specifically our entrepreneurs or our startups that are working within that space, and how we translate that, and really the role of those companies within those bigger, sort of sometimes harder to understand policy areas of priority and focus. So that's probably me in a nutshell. But I'm ready for a break after this year. It's been a huge year, I think, for everyone here. I think everyone on this call can probably empathize with that. But wow, this has come as a very timely Christmas party.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Philippe. Yeah, I really appreciate your support all the way through and really good insights there. Jules, I know you got to hop off as well. I might give you the last word before we go, though. I do also want to do one other final shout out. I do see Laura Thurlow is in the chat. This wouldn't be possible in some ways without Laura from the Melbourne Convention Bureau, who was that person that gave me a call back in 2020 and said, "Hey, we're bringing the GEC to Australia. What do you reckon?" So it really does just show that it's kind of a, you never know what those fortuitous things come along, and you just say yes and give it a go. So Laura, just see you in there, and just want to say thanks heaps as well for that call, and everything kind of came after that. But Jules, I might just give you the final word as the chair, just a bit of reflections, a recap, and what you see as what's next.
Chad, thank you. So you all on the call might have seen in the chat, Chad was talking about how we won a research award. We did not win a research award. Chad won the research award. So can I please, while we are all on this call, can we give Chad a round of applause for the award and for everything that he does? Chad, you, as Philip said, a lot of us have had a very big year. You've had a big couple of years, and I think I hope you take some time over the festive season to reflect on the impact that you have on a very regular basis for all of us across Australia. I think, the ego versus ecosystem's already been mentioned on this call, and any of us that know you well know that you are always thinking about the ecosystem, and we really appreciate it. So I really do. Team, I know it's a big team effort and we're all in it together, but Chad, I really did want to make sure that you had a special shout out today. We are all in it together, and yet you go over and above on a constant, constantly to be able to deliver on all of the things that we talk about. So I just thank you so much for everything, and I want to make sure that you know how grateful we all are for the work that you do with all of your 47 million hats that you wear. So thank you very much. Everybody else on the call, can I say thanks for joining us this morning? We really did want to kind of go full circle with you all. Some of you we've been talking to while we were all in Riyadh going, oh my God, this is coming. This is what we need to do through until today. So it's been lovely to kind of be able to bring some of this back to you all and give you a debrief on what came out of the event itself. Doors are open. If have a think about it over the festive season and come back to us in the new year around how and where you want to be involved, what role formally or informally you might like with Gen Australia. We don't want 47 people on the board because that gets a bit unwieldy and unmanageable, but we want to make sure that it's a representative board and that people are there to do the work that they want to do. So really, I would, as a call to action, ask if people can have a think about, from the information you've got from Chad and from what we've all talked about together this morning, where do you see yourselves fitting in the new year, and maybe in first quarter we have another catch up like this that's open, where we can come back together and not talk about GEC as such, but talk about the where to and who's doing what, and have that as a bit of a community of practice ourselves across what's going on. So thank you for joining us this morning. I know people have got a lot on at this time of the year, but wish you Merry Christmas, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the new year as we all continue to work together.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. See y'all.